Hey team, how's it going? I wanted to talk to you very quickly today about psychology a little bit and the psychology behind celebrating wins. Because obviously, I ask you guys every Friday kind of like what your wins for the week have been and things like that. And we find it difficult. We all find it difficult. I've been asked by people who've mentored me and coaches always ask me what my wins are, and I have just as hard time as anyone else. And I wanted to delve into why we're even doing it. What's the point in celebrating wins? And it's not just a feel good marketing ploy to kind of get us to say some nice things that we can stick on social media. There's actual science behind it, and I'm going to explain that. So, regard my notebook. So when it comes to wins, this is kind of how we typically set ourselves up, and we set ourselves up for failure, really. So if we imagine, let's talk about training and nutrition, and this is the spectrum of what's achievable compared to like absolute failure. And I kind of split this up into a few generic type of outcomes. So all your sessions, you hit all of your sessions and you smashed those sessions. It was perfect and your nutrition was perfect. So that's like what's achievable. What we typically set ourselves up for, which is a pretty high standard, is we get all of our sessions in. Most of them were good, some of them were okay, and nutrition was not bad either. Nutrition was fairly decent. Down at the center, we've got our sessions were average and our nutrition was average. Below, we've got we missed a session or two and our nutrition wasn't great. And then at the bottom, all terrible. We missed all of our training and our nutrition's been really bad. So what we do is we set ourselves up with a fairly high standard. We're like, okay, we would like to achieve this. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having high standards. In fact, I am an advocate of having high standards. However, you can see on the spectrum that we're aiming for this. And two things that happen. One is that it means that if we achieve something kind of in this zone here, it's just what we aimed for. So we don't really give ourselves credit. We say like, okay, well, I hit all my sessions. Some were good, some were okay. My nutrition's been pretty good. And we don't give ourselves credit for that because we just say, well, that's how it should have been. That's what I was aiming for. But anything below that, we then see as being, oh, we didn't get up to the standards that we wanted. And you can see just visually here that this is literally our possibility for celebrating wins is this little gap here. It's hardly anything, but this is our potential failures that we'll criticize ourselves for. So we're setting ourselves up to not really ever celebrate any wins and not get anything positive out of it, but always be able to criticize ourselves. And this is the problem, is because you can see average sort of spectrum of results is all of this. And even if you're hitting kind of here, average, or even down here, there's still wins. You're still getting sessions in. You're still moving forwards. You're still progressing. You're still getting positive outcomes, but you'll just never give yourself credit for it. So we're setting ourselves up for failure, essentially. Your brain needs signals. So the brain kind of can have thoughts and produce ideas that aren't necessarily your identity. So what we can do is practice what we want to happen. And this brings me down to my kind of like feedback loop. So we put in effort, you give yourself a little reward, and that basically is you acknowledging that you've put in effort, and the reward is you acknowledging that, and maybe you do something to reinforce it, but it's a signal to yourself that what you did was meaningful and you should do more of it. That leads to more motivation, that puts in more effort, reward, motivation, and it gives you this like self-feeding cycle. But you could almost look at it less of like a loop like this and more of like a upward spiral, because you're building momentum and you're gaining and you're progressing. So this is kind of really what it looks like as a 3D model. Acknowledge, that's a signal to your brain, and that's practice, right? It's not necessarily intrinsic, especially if our habit is to only ever celebrate if we do something amazing. And even if we hit what we wanted to, that's not worth celebrating because it's just what should have happened. then we're reteaching our brain to create an upward spiral. And that means that we not only have more motivation, but we feel better about that motivation. This is meaningful, do more of it. By not acknowledging it, that's not humility. That's not saying, oh, that's just me being humble. That's you avoiding a true emotion. That is you kind of avoiding the reality of the situation for some reason, because you think that either, excuse me, you think that it's nothing and it's not worth it, and you've kind of learned that value only comes from winning. It could be that you just think other people can do it, and so you compare to other people, and you're not, again, giving yourself credit for what you're capable of, or you're just looking at the gap rather than the gain. So it's maybe not where you want to be yet, so you kind of think, okay, it's not worth celebrating yet, but you're not looking at the gain that you've made up to that point. So if you never allow yourself to feel proud, you never build internal validation, and you stay dependent on external proof. And that is kind of almost the equivalent of being in a constant deficit, right? With a complete lack of energy and nutrients. And this is like nutrients for your mind. It's basically being able to acknowledge it. So I'd be interested to know if any of that sounds familiar to anyone. But we're going to try and change it. So let's move across. Wins are like psychological leverage, and obviously we've got big wins, and these are obvious ones. So getting a new 1 rep max, finishing on a podium, any kind of big achievement, they're obvious wins. But really, your identity and this change is going to come from these smaller wins. And I've written down just a few examples here to give you an idea of what these smaller wins could be. So not reacting emotionally to a situation, that's a win. Sleeping 8 hours, especially if you're somebody who, gets stuck scrolling on your phone or something sometimes, that's a win. Staying patient with someone, especially if they're testing your patience, again, that's a win. And showing up when it feels hard, that's actually probably a massive win, but it's one of these ones that doesn't seem as obvious. But showing up when it's hard is a win. So these are basically what you could call like identity reps. They're you putting in the reps to become the person you want to become. But if you ignore them, then you're essentially kind of reinforcing the fact that it's never enough. So this next little diagram here is something that I wanted to show and highlight, because one of the things that sometimes comes up when I speak to people about wins is thinking that if they celebrate, they'll become complacent and they'll lose their edge and they'll never kind of progress. And I want to get you guys to think about people who do achieve stuff. So people who, like, I don't know, win at the Winter Olympics or win CrossFit competitions or whatever it might be. Roger Federer, Cristiano Ronaldo, like when those guys have won something big, do you think that they then take their foot off the gas? And the answer is obviously no. It doesn't happen. Just because you win doesn't mean that you become complacent. In fact, the best performers, whether it's in, sports, whether it's in business, whatever it is, they actually deliberately celebrate. They are intentional about their celebration and they spend time with it. And they might kind of have the mindset of thinking, whether it's a win or not, they might think that was a strong performance and I'm proud of that. Now, how can I move forward from there? So there's no loss of hunger, but it's just, being kind of, not emotional avoidance. This is kind of almost like emotional stability and strength. And then you compete better from, I guess, kind of like being full mentally. So that's why I put down here, being humble, it kind of winning doesn't mean that you lose being humble. Being humble and proud, I think that's very healthy. But it feels hard sometimes, and this is my final bit to this puzzle, is when we try to celebrate wins, it can expose vulnerability because it makes us question, what if I can't repeat it? Or if I'm satisfied now, then, is there any point in chasing anything else? Or maybe sometimes people think that it feels arrogant, and it's like, I shouldn't big myself up. And you might have experience as a kid growing up or in school or even as an adult where kind of being proud of yourself has been, other people who might be jealous have kind of shot you down a little bit, and you've grown this gremlin of thinking, I should never celebrate my wins because people will think that I'm a dick if I do. And it's honestly not the truth. Or even if it is the truth, that shouldn't be something that shapes your mindset is other people's jealousy. So that's why there's a danger here of not celebrating wins is basically never feeling enough, never feeling like you've arrived. Or even if you are hitting success, it's with zero satisfaction because it never feels like enough. And that's basically how people can very gradually burn out, or people who, and we've seen it with celebrities and stuff as well, who can achieve high levels of success, but then are very down and depressed and, having a hard time because it's really not about the success itself. It's about the mindset and identity that comes with that success. So that was my little presentation, my little TED talk for today, and my little reason, I guess, for wanting to explain to you guys why it's worth on a Friday when I say, what are your wins for the week? It's worth practicing this and trying really hard to find those wins, big or small, because it is you becoming a more energized, more optimistic, more motivated version of yourself. Whether you're trying to be an athlete and you become a better athlete off the back of it, or whether it's just you trying to live a good life, this is a big psychological factor that helps you feel more satisfied and fulfilled, and goes a long way to creating a healthy mindset.